Tonight we're in Dundee, and welcome to Question Time. Good evening to you at home. Welcome to our audience here. We're going to be asking the questions and arguing with our panel, who of course don't know what those questions will be. They are the Finance Secretary in the Scottish Government, John Swinney, Scottish Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, Kezia Dugdale, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, and the former deputy leader of the SNP, who supports independence but is a critic of the way the campaign is being fought, Jim Sillars. And as you'll have noticed, our panel is 4 tonight, not our usual 5. For a very straightforward reason, we want to get a panel that was equally balanced on the issue of independence. And of course, 5 would not allow us to do that. But independence is not the only thing by any means that we're going to talk about tonight. Anyway, let's take our first question, if we could, please. Daniel Heron has it. Daniel Heron, please.
Would Scotland be better or worse off in an independent Scotland?
Would Scotland be better or worse off as an independent Scotland? Ruth Davidson.
Well, I think we've had certainly an answer from people across Scotland this week with the Scottish Social Attitude Survey. Now, John Swinney's government's been in power for 7 years here in Holyrood, and for 7 years they've been telling us everything will be better in an independent Scotland, the country will be richer, everybody in it will be richer. They've said that you can't flourish as part of the United Kingdom, and we've seen with the statistics this week from people's attitudes that only 9% of people in Scotland, fewer than 1 in 10, think they'd be better off in an independent Scotland. And also we've seen this week...
But are they right, is the question, sure.
Well, I think...
I mean, you're asked your opinion, not what the public opinion polls show.
Sure. Well, I think if you look at the growth rates in Scotland, if you look at the positive indicators that we've had just this week in terms of unemployment, that's dropped to 6.4%, which is great news. If you look at the manufacturing output in Scotland, you're seeing that we're coming out of a tough recession. And one of the things that has been very good for us, I feel, is particularly when we were in the difficulties with the Scottish banks, is that we had a strong economy behind us. And when you look at the fact that we export twice as much to the rest of the UK as we do to the rest of the world, so you add all your Americas, your European Unions, your Indias, your Chinas all together, we sell more to England, Wales and Northern Ireland than we do to all of those put together. And we see every day the benefits from being in the United Kingdom.
All right, John Swinney.
I think Scotland will be better off as an independent country, and the reason why I think that is twofold. Firstly, that I think the decisions that affect the people of Scotland are best taken here in Scotland by people who care most about the future of our country, and that's the people who choose to live and to work here and to build their future and our country's future together here. And the second reason is because if we look at the economic progress that we've made in Scotland since we got the Scottish Parliament and got some limited control over these issues here in Scotland, the Scottish economy has got stronger. We're in a position, as Ruth quite rightly says, where we've got progress on employment, we've got lower unemployment than the rest of the UK, higher employment than the rest of the United Kingdom. That's because we've been able to exercise different choices on a limited basis within the economy to boost the performance of the Scottish economy. So I deduce from that if we can use the powers of devolution to make Scotland a stronger economy, then the powers of independence will give us a much greater opportunity to do that even further.
Okay. Ruth mentioned this opinion survey, social attitude survey this week, which suggested that there's only £500 in the issue for the people of Scotland, voters of Scotland. If they're £500 better off independent, they'll vote independent. If they're £500 worse off, they won't. Do you agree with that?
I don't
agree. An assessment?
I don't agree with that, no. I think
as a judgment of public opinion.
Well, obviously, if the survey says that's what people said, that's what people said to the survey. But I think the judgment is actually a deeper judgment. I think people will tend to form their opinion based on what they think the economic prospects will be for Scotland as an independent country, but that will be balanced against what they think the economic prospects of Scotland will be by remaining in the United Kingdom. And the economic prospects of remaining part of the United Kingdom, for me, are very, very poor for people in Scotland, and that's why I think they'll vote yes in September.
Kezia, I'll come to you. Can I just go... Yeah, I'd just like to go to the question, if I can. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, it was only because of that £500. if you voted yes and 500, and there's no campaign saying you'll be £500 worse off.
And do you think is that the way you'd make your mind up?
Well, where do you get this £500 from?
Where do you get the £500 from?
You just pluck that figure out of the air.
I think the questioners, the people who wrote the survey, did just pluck it out the air.
Yeah.
Because that hasn't been a figure that either John or myself or anyone has particularly bandied about.
It's slightly like somebody standing at the end of the pier and saying, here's £500, vote, take it away if you don't.
Yeah, but there could be two sides of that. There could be someone's SNP saying, we'll give you £500 to vote, and there could be the other one standing on the other side saying, we'll give you £500.
But I think the argument, Daniel, is about the extent to which people see where their economic future lies. Okay. And I think if people look at
it's got nothing to do with £500 then.
Well, I don't think that's the particular that hinges on.
But then, OK, if it's not £500,
it's whether people think their long-term economic future is more secure.
OK, but if it's not £500, would it be £1,000, £2,000 would switch it, or is money irrelevant?
What figure do you put on it then?
Sorry, say it again.
What figure do you put on it?
Yeah.
There's no figure. You have to make your own mind up.
OK, you said yes, with the moustache.
The negativity that we're getting from the Better Together campaign against the streets are paved with gold from the Scottish National Party, I think is a disgrace for the Scottish people that we can't see a proper debate as to what is actually going to be better for Scotland. Can we not do away with the rhetoric and start talking about what is going to be better for Scotland?
And what do you mean by that? What are you getting at? What kind of things do you want talked about?
Well, we really want to hear from both sides of the argument what the pros and cons are. At the minute, the Better Together campaign is giving us a lot of scaremongering, which is bad. It's just not good for the debate. And the SNPs, frankly, are saying, well, you're going to be better off here or better off there. We need an honest debate, and time is running out.
OK. Kezia.
That guy's point is absolutely right. And, I hear people right around the country saying what they want is facts. They want to understand what the issues are and come to their own conclusions, in many ways without party politics driving it. So don't listen to the SNP position or the Labour position. Look at what the IFS are saying, who are saying that the gap between what we spend and what we raise in tax would be twice what it would be in the United Kingdom if we were independent. Now, I think that's some pretty strong evidence there. In real terms, what does that mean? It's £1,000 to the guy over there who's talking about £500. We would have to increase tax by £1,000 per person or reduce public spending to that same effect. Now, you might choose that. You might believe to your core, like John and Jim do, that nationalism's worth whatever price. But you might also look to your own pocket, think about your kids' future and decide that we're stronger as part of the United Kingdom. OK.
Yes, the lady over there, the blonde hair.
In the white paper, it states that English students would continue to pay tuition fees if Scotland went independent. However, recently we have found out that this is actually against EU law. I was wondering how they think that they can go about this.
But that's not quite the question. It's not quite a central issue, is it? That. I mean, it's an issue whether English students.
I think what the lady's saying actually comes back to what this gentleman here was saying, which is about having facts rather than having assertions. And sometimes I absolutely take the gentleman's point that sometimes it does seem as if people on the Better Together side of the argument are saying, hold on, hang on a minute, try and explain yourself here. But when you do have people entering the debate saying, we have legal advice and we'd waltz into the EU and there'd be no question about it, and then you challenge them on it and they say, well, actually, after spending £20,000 of taxpayers' money to fight a case, we'll just have to admit that actually we'd never had the legal advice in the first place. When they say, of course we would let students, we would be able to have the organisation that we have now, when all the European law says no, then you've got to challenge those assertions, because you're right, people deserve to not just have, this is the vision and this is the dream. They need to show that there's some evidence behind that too, and I think that both of these points are true.
Jim, I said at the beginning you were a former member of the SNP, and I described you as being in favour of a yes vote, but critical of the way the campaign is being put forward by the SNP. Is that right? Is that a fair description?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the SNP in a sense, not of it at the present time. This has got nothing to do with £500 either way. This is a ridiculous argument. This is about the question of whether Scotland remains part of a state which is in its final stages of imperial decline. And all my life, Portugal had an empire decline, Spain had an empire decline, Rome, Persia, it always happens. And we are now at the final end of the decline of the English/British Empire. And the home unit, which is basically England because it's the major part of the United Kingdom, has been in serious economic trouble, not for the last 4 or 5 years, but for decades. I can remember as a boy everybody tuning in to Sir Stafford Cripps's emergency budgets, and it's been like that ever since.
That's taking us back a long way.
Yes, of course.
That's the
Yeah,
Can you really remember Stafford Cripps?
yes, as a matter of fact.
That's the point.
As a matter of fact, when I was a boy, there were two things that mattered. One was the emergency budget, and the other was the harvest. Because when I was a boy, we knew where food came from. It came from farms, not like supermarkets that some folk think now. So we've had this decline. What's the future? At the moment, we are heading, if we stay in the United Kingdom, for a national debt of £1.5 trillion. George, this is not scaremongering. That's a fact. Osborne says that come 2015, 2016, after the next election, there are £25 billion worth of cuts coming. And there'll be more after that as well. So the question is, do we want to stay in an austerity-bound country, the United Kingdom, or do we want to do something different with an entirely different economic model in the years ahead, where independently we can go in an entirely different direction?
So you'll be free. So you'll be free of debt, John Swinney, as Finance Secretary in independent Scotland. You won't have anything to pay back to anybody, is that right?
We certainly will be saddled with a tremendous amount of debt that's been run up by the successive leaders of the United Kingdom in the fashion that Jim has just outlined. But what we've got the opportunity to do, which is where I entirely agree with Jim, is we've got the opportunity to chart a fundamentally different course from the austerity agenda of the United Kingdom to concentrate on expanding employment, growing the economy, creating the opportunities, getting people to stay in this country, not to leave to get their economic opportunities elsewhere, and to build a stronger and more vibrant economy. That's the opportunity we've got here, and we should take it in September.
But John, that's what you say in public, but what you say in private is a completely different story. I don't know if you've picked this up, David, but there was a leaked paper that came from John Swinney's department that showed that you were going to have to question the affordability of pensions. You were going to have to make cuts.
Hold on, she's attacking you. Let her attack you. Then you can answer. I will do.
But do you disagree that you say one thing in public and then you're briefing your own cabinet behind the scenes that the future of Scotland in an independent country is really quite stark and that you're going to face really quite serious cuts that are just as serious, if not more serious, than the UK would as a whole?
Well, the paper I discussed with my cabinet colleagues was about how we can marshal the arguments to put forward the strong proposition of how, with the powers in Scotland, we can create a stronger economy that generates the wealth that enables us to deliver prosperity for people in Scotland. And as for the affordability of pensions, any responsible finance minister that does their job properly makes sure we can pay pensions to our pensioners, which is the solemn promise we've made to people in Scotland. That's what writing these papers is about, to get the facts in place, to get the arguments in place, so we can deliver the prosperity for the people of Scotland.
All right, you sir.
I absolutely believe that giving young people the vote at 16 was the right thing to do. However, I believe that the scaremongering that's currently going on between the parties, for example, from the Liberal Democrats today stating that there would have to be border controls between Scotland and England, is scaremongering young people, and I believe that education should be put forward for young people on an independent side of the argument.
Are you saying, are you saying all parties are scaremongering in order to get your vote?
Currently, I think that both parties, both pro
both
and...
yes and no?
Both yes and no parties are currently scaremongering, and especially young people who are going to be voting for the first time. I think they should be given a fair chance at voting.
OK. Hold on a second, Ruth. Let's hear from the man up there in the second row from the back.
I think Mr Swinney has been disingenuous. He's always banging on about the economic levers of power that he requires to make Scotland progress. But he already has tax-raising powers. He can increase or decrease them by 3%. and by 2016 he's going to have full tax-raising powers through the Scotland Act. And on top of that, he's forfeiting the right of managing interest rates by handing that over to the Bank of England. So he's either, what's he wanting? He's got a great deal of autonomy and a great deal of power in his hands already, and he's denying that he does have it.
So you're saying he's got what he needs and doesn't need any more power?
I feel he's got a great deal of autonomy, and actually he will be forfeiting quite a lot of power by developing the sterling zone, which he refers to.
The Bank of England. And the woman over there at the back there, yes.
Well, Jim noted that if we were to leave the UK, the main reason would be to avoid the vast amount of debt. Then why are the main policies that we're focusing on is massive services for everyone, freeze on council tax, freeze in childcare, possibly a reduction in corporation tax? Money doesn't grow on trees. You either have to increase tax or you're going to get yourself into a lot of debt.
I think there's a few points that I want to pick up, and I can start with the gentleman here when he was talking about giving votes to 16-year-olds. I was actually against giving votes to 16-year-olds because I don't believe that you change the franchise for just one vote. I mean, if you want to have a wider discussion about who gets to vote and who doesn't, but you don't just, you know, pockle who does the voting in one poll. But what I found really interesting, actually, over the last year is how engaged young people have been. And it's been a revelation. It's actually, I think, been really good for Scotland. And when he talks about young people understanding the issues, actually I think they asked some of the most sensible questions in this debate. And we've had one of the biggest polls right across Scotland in the last year was done in Aberdeenshire, and every single secondary school in the whole of Aberdeenshire had a project where they looked at both sides of the arguments. They had Yes Scotland material, they had Better Together material, and they did a project on it, and then they all went to the polling station on the same day and cast their ballots, and they had the returning officer from the council doing it for it. And it was 75% no, 25% yes. And it was over 10,000 people that were polled there. And for me, and this is what I pick up in all the schools events that I do and all the university events that I do, is people just don't understand in this day and age why you're part of a wider union, you want to remove yourself from it. Why would you want to break up being part of something bigger? Because as a young person, you're so used to being part of a global society. You listen to rock music from America and films from everywhere.
You made the point. I'll come to you in a second. Just while we're on all this, I should say you can, of course, join in from home on this, either by text or Twitter, whether in Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland. Hashtag is BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text comments to 83981, and the red button will tell you what others are saying if you want to do it that way, though Twitter seems to be the most popular way of getting in touch at the moment. Get twittering. And I'd like to hear from some people who... We've had quite a lot of complaints about the way that Scotland might go if it votes yes. Have we got people here in favour of a yes vote? Are you in favour of a yes vote? OK, give us your view.
Yes, I would just like to say that there's been a lot of focus on the economics, and obviously that's important, but I think you have to think about, OK, if we have to make cuts either way, let's say that's true, but let's think, do we want to be part of a country that decides to make cuts for the most vulnerable, the most sick? They want to, basically, it sounds to me like the coalition government's policies are going to push a lot of women back into the home, or do we want to make cuts in different places that could maybe see women and other ethnic minorities and the whole of Scotland flourish a lot more? And that's not just about economics as well, that's also about culture. Are we currently having enough of a space for Scottish culture? Are we currently having enough space for Scotland to make the most of itself? And I personally think that independence is the way to go to make sure that happens.
John Swinney, you've had just a slight switch of emphasis here. You've had quite a lot of time campaigning. Why do you think public opinion appears to be 2-to-1 against voting yes for independence? Why do you think that is? And I'll ask you this too, Jim, in a moment.
I think the answer, David, lies in the fact that the debate is only now just beginning to be engaged by people in Scotland. You know, if you look at the 2-to-1 figure, has broadly been the figure for many, many years. And we're now actively engaged in a debate where people have got to make a choice. It's not a question that's, you know, some years in the future. In a few months' time, members of the public in Scotland will have to make that choice. and they're beginning to engage in the debate. And what we're finding is that when we go into that active discussion, when we are engaging people in these questions, people become more supportive of independence as we explain the arguments and the rationale. That's why it's so important that we get out and about around the country, we persuade people of these arguments. It's why we publish...
I heard this argument 6 months ago when we were debating independence on question time in Scotland. I mean, that's been a constant refrain. When people hear the arguments, they'll come to our side.
Well, but
they don't show any signs of doing it.
What we've done in the last few weeks, and long after the social attitude survey was put together, we've published the white paper setting out the government's arguments as to what the prospectus is for Scottish independence. And we'll sustain that argument with people over the course of the next 8 months and get that to as wide an audience as we possibly can.
Jim Sillars, why do you think it's at best been very, very slow to grow the yes vote, or the people saying they'll vote yes? What is it?
I'll come to that in a minute, David, but the lady up there said money doesn't grow in trees.
Well, so the lady up there?
Yes, the lady up there. Actually, it does.
Oh, it does?
Oh, yes.
What's the tree?
No, everybody's heard... Oh, yes, you should listen. This is something you obviously don't know about. Have you all heard of quantitative easing? That's printing money, same as it growing on trees. We're now in the ridiculous position where a third of the national debt is held by a government institution, the Bank of England. It holds the debt of another government institution, the Treasury. And the Treasury pays interest to the Bank of England, another government institution, and then takes the money back as interest. 35 billion last time.
Yeah.
Now, this is very funny money if you think about it.
But I don't want to stop you on that, but I am going to, because John Swinney has said there will be debt in an independent Scotland. No, but I want you to address this question. Why has...
Yes, I will do.
Well, no, please, but you haven't got all day. Why?
There's no problem in addressing it very quickly.
OK.
If you think of it, almost a third of the debt is in the Bank of England. Is that real debt? Could that be written off debt? Probably could be. So the debt issue is much more complex than people realise. And don't forget, quantitative easing is a form of money grown into...
And so why, why are these arguments not winning the day?
Now, I'll tell you why, in my opinion. There are two reasons, particularly in respect of the Labour voter. We're finding that people think that if you vote yes, you endorse Alex Salmond and the SNP, and they don't want to do that. That's being picked up, and it's been talked about sotto voce, but everybody knows that's the case. That's one reason. The other reason is that the white paper was far too large, 670 pages, and was also launched at the wrong time. You don't launch just about 3 weeks before Christmas, because come the 12th of December, everybody switches off.
But what's the objection to Alex Salmond? They voted him in as First Minister of Scotland under devolution. So why would people be saying, oh, it means we've got to have Salmond?
I think there are two types of people. One, I think, is using this as an excuse that we don't like Alex Salmond and the SNP, and that gets them off the hook of engaging in the dialogue. The other one is they've been in government for some considerable period of time, and therefore people have taken against them to some extent. And we're tribal in Scotland. Labour voters don't like the SNP.
But plenty of Labour voters voted for the SNP in the 2011 election because they thought, well, we were a competent government that did a good job for Scotland. But
nowhere near the same amount are saying they're going to vote for yes at the moment.
Okay, Kezia, let's wait and see what Labour voters are saying, because I think Jim's right. There's an engagement from Labour voters. And look at the folk who've come out. Sir Charles Grey, one of the most distinguished Scottish Labour politicians, has been former leader of Strathclyde Regional Council. Alec Mawson, former Labour Lord Provost of Glasgow. These are fine Labour individuals who've come out to back independence.
Let's hear from our fine Labour member of the panel. What do you say to all this talk about what Labour's doing or not doing?
Well, I'm listening to Jim, and the problem with Jim's argument is that, unfortunately for the Labour Party in Scotland at the moment, the public like the SNP government. It's a popular government. What they don't like is independence, and that's why I think it's going to be rejected come September in the vote. But there's a wider point. There's a wider point to that, and I was interested in your comments about the white paper, because it's not really a white paper. It's an SNP manifesto. It's a wish list without a price list to it.
I have nothing but respect for Jim, because he has spent an absolute lifetime advocating a cause, and he's done it with a level of transparency that we're actually not seeing from the SNP government. Now, I disagree with the cause that you're espousing, and frankly, I disagree with your analysis that Britain is over, because I actually think the best days are ahead of us, and the successes of the UK are our successes too, and as Scots, we should own them. But what I think is decent and honest about you, Jim, is that you do say things like, this idea of a currency union is nonsense, and I think you've said it's dreamt up in the back of a fag packet. This idea of dipping in and out of NATO, this idea of making a mess about the EU. People can smell when folk aren't necessarily telling the whole truth.
Right.
And I think what's great about you is that at least you're unvarnished about what it is that you've wanted for an entire lifetime. And people look at Alex Salmond and they know that he's trying to play the numbers, and he'll say or do anything to try and shift the polls and get a few hundred votes here and a few hundred votes there.
I'd just like to hear a little bit more from the audience. I said we weren't going to stick with independence as an issue right the way through, and we won't. But the woman there with spectacles on the right, you, madam, yes.
I just wanted to say I think it's fairly apparent why people aren't moving in droves to change their vote to a yes, because let's be honest, the default right now is no. We're currently in the UK. We have to make a decision to move away from the UK now. I personally, if you asked me tomorrow, I'd probably vote yes, but I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be that happy about it. I'd vote yes because I want to jettison Westminster. I'd vote yes because I like Scotland's electoral system better. I'd vote yes because I don't think that they represent me in London. I think they've got too much power. I wouldn't be voting yes because I necessarily think that the ideas behind an independent Scotland are that great. And I think that's not coming across. Now, in some respects, that's possibly good for you. I actually think probably far more people tomorrow would vote yes than you think, but they wouldn't enjoy it.
OK. And the woman there, yes.
When Ruth talks about people not telling the truth, Scotland's resources have been eroded for a long time. Yeah. The Scottish waters past Dundee now come under England. The House of Lords voted a couple of weeks ago. They've taken away the Scottish rights for our renewable energy. Where's the truth on that? Not many people know about it. That's not in the media.
All right. And the man in the fourth row here.
I think media control's got a lot to do with things. And in the week that's seen a university study revealing a bias in the media against Scottish independence, I think that bears a big part on what people believe and what they read.
Okay.
But also, we're referring to opinion polls a lot, and look at the opinion polls before the last Scottish elections. None of them were predicting a landslide for the SNP, and that's what happened.
September the 18th. Let's go on to another question from Eileen Murray, please. Eileen Murray.
Can Nick Clegg force Lib Dems peer Lord Reynard to apologise for harassment claims when he believes he is innocent?
The Liberal Democrats are obviously in some confusion over this, but can Nick Clegg force Lord Reynard, the man who strategised their election campaigns, to apologise for harassment claims when he, Lord Reynard, believes he's innocent? John Swinney.
I don't know if Nick Clegg can force him to do that, but
I think it means should he, as well as can he.
Well, I think the issue that the lesson I would take from what the Liberal Democrats have done about Lord Reynard this week is that when you have an issue like this, you have to deal with it promptly and effectively, and to address the issues that people have reasonably and properly set out. And if there is information that leads to a conclusion that action needs to be taken, then action needs to be taken. I think the terrible mistake the Liberals have made is to let this drag on and to become ever more complicated and not to address fundamentally the issues that are at stake.
And what is the fundamental issue? Because you put a QC in charge and he says the women's claims are credible, and Lord Reynard says it's not true.
Well, that essentially, like when you join a political party, you sign up to a set of rules, and part of the rules will be that processes will be applied in certain circumstances. And if you set up an inquiry which says, by a QC to take an independent look at it, and it comes up with a conclusion of that type, then if you respect your political party, you should follow it and implement the conclusions of that review, which means that Lord Reynard should apologise.
Ruth Davidson.
Well, I think what was quite clear here is there was a member of a political party, Lord Reynard, who made other members of that party feel grossly uncomfortable. They felt as if, in some ways, their personal space had been invaded. They felt, in some ways, threatened and violated by his actions. Now, I think, as somebody, as an organisation, a political party has a duty of care and pastoral care for its members. And if a number of members are coming to you, and this happened years ago, this isn't just a new thing, there were complaints made about this gentleman a long time ago, you have to be firm and say to that person, address your behaviour because this is affecting other people in the team. And if you do not
even
address
if he denies that he's guilty of any improper behaviour?
Well, he says that he doesn't think he acted badly, but there are members of that party and organisation who felt threatened and violated by his actions.
And that would be enough.
And who were credible. Now, I think you have a duty of care for people, and you have to explain to someone, you know, your actions are affecting other people in the team.
Okay.
And you either send them, you know, they either address that or they're out.
All right.
And that's how you deal with it. You don't have to have someone in a political party. It's like a publican doesn't have to serve a customer. You can say, change this or you're gone. And you have every right to do so.
Jim Sillars.
I don't think in the scale of the problems facing humanity that this is the biggest one. I don't know what the allegations were. They've never been made public, so I don't know how anyone of us can draw any conclusions whatsoever. And as they say in some of the panel games, as far as I'm concerned, pass, because I don't know enough about it to comment sensibly.
OK. And Kezia?
I think part of the problem is too many people turned away from it and said, I don't want to be involved in that, I don't want to front that out, I don't want to address it. And the people I really feel for this are the women who have had to put themselves on the front of our newspapers to be heard about something as simple as everyday sexism. Women right across the country every single day face this type of experience at work. And the world has to change.
What is it the allegation is? I've never heard it. I've heard all inappropriate behaviour.
Well,
but what did he actually do? If we knew that, then you can make some judgment.
The allegations are that he groped a woman. And
well, that's the first time I've heard that.
And if you read the Channel 4 blog, I think it was Cathy Newman that doggedly pursued this, the Channel 4 journalist. She's the only reason that this is still with us as an issue. And I just think it talks a lot about the nature of our society and our culture just now, that we do not live in an equal world. Women are still oppressed by men. This is the experience of women at work every single day. And let's talk about it as a country. So we don't start talking about it, we can't change it.
You know, actually this is not...
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Briefly.
In a weird way, although I agree pretty much actually with almost everything Kezia said, I don't think that this story is a sex story. I think the story is a power story. Yeah. And it's about a man who was in a great deal of power in his organisation, who'd helped fund it, who was picking who was going to be, I'll make you an MP, darling, I'll make you an MP, and he was exercising that power in a way that was inappropriate. And, you know, I fully accept you don't want to tread on areas where you haven't heard the allegations, Jim. No, but other people have, because there have been victims of Lord Reynard who have gone on television and have given up their anonymity, even though they found it embarrassing, even though they found it uncomfortable, to say, this has to stop, because it didn't just happen to me, it happened to others, and it shouldn't ever happen again.
OK, hold on. We're going to move on, because, as you say, this is not the greatest issue we have to face this evening. But I just should comment that Lord Reynard, of course, says that he regrets if he's caused any hurt or embarrassment, but will not offer an apology, doesn't believe to be people should be forced to say what they know they should not say or do not mean. I've never hurt or embarrassed or upset anyone. And if I had, I would regret it. So he does deny the allegations which we've been talking about. I'm going to move on because we've got a lot to get through, and we spent a good half of the programme on Scottish independence. And I want a question from Patrick Swinney. No relation, I take it.
Are the UK government's changes to the welfare benefit system setting the poor free from dependence or punishing them?
Are the changes that have been made, Ian Duncan-Smith's changes and the cutbacks on welfare, housing benefit for the young, and the attempt to produce a single benefit and all that, are they setting people free from dependence, which is what Ian Duncan-Smith in a speech today said? He said he had a historic mission, the Conservatives. Just look at Wilberforce and Shaftesbury, the ending of slavery and of child labour, and it's like that, to put back hope where it's gone. Kezia, is that how you see it? Is it freeing people from dependence?
I think that's probably an intention, but it's not working. It's not working. And Labour this week have come out with what I think is a good idea, the idea of a compulsory jobs guarantee. What we'll do is we'll get people into work, we'll give them 6 months of paid employment paid at the national minimum wage. Because it's all very well and good for Ian Duncan-Smith to tell people to go out and get work, but there aren't jobs. We need to create jobs. And specifically, if you're young and you don't have work experience, you're competing with 20, 30 people for each job that's going. And that experience of being dejected time and time again, it's scarring. And young people need a chance, a bit of hope, a bit of opportunity. And hopefully that's what they'll get when Labour is back in power.
But how is your claim that how you'll deal with people trying to get jobs any less oppressive to people who haven't got work than Duncan Smith's? I mean, you're going to say, if they don't have the skills for a job, you lose your job seeker's allowance, have to take up training, or you lose your benefits.
Well, what we're saying is if you don't have the skills, we're going to offer you the chance to get those skills.
And if you don't take the chance, you lose your benefits. So you're in Ian Duncan Smith's camp.
Well, I think the Tories support sanctions, the SNP support sanctions, the Labour Party supports sanctions, but what we are trying to do is to give young people a chance. We're going to give them a job. That's what they need. When I spoke on youth unemployment for 2 years, the Scottish Labour Party, I met hundreds of young unemployed people across Scotland, and all they want is a chance. They just want a job. They just want a start in life. And this is our answer, and I think it's a good one.
OK. The man up there at the back on the right, you, sir.
Yeah, I'm totally opposed to the benefit culture, but I'm not talking about the working poor or the unemployed or the sick or the elderly. I'm talking about the £7 billion of welfare money, our taxes, that go straight into the pockets of employers who are paying their workers at below the minimum wage. I'm also annoyed at the £23 billion of our money that goes straight into the bank accounts of landlords who charge exorbitant rents because there's a housing shortage. And I'm totally opposed to the massive tax avoidance and evasion that's taking place today on part of the rich individuals and corporate Britain. They're paying next to zero in corporation tax and in tax on the rich. It's about time welfare dependency was ended and the ordinary people of this country got their say and allowed to change what's happening.
Ruth Davidson.
I think some of the things that have happened in this country have been a disgrace. I think it is an
The things he's describing?
No, I think it's an absolute disgrace.
No, his points.
I'm going to come to that.
Yeah,
I think it's an absolute disgrace that 1.4 million people were left unemployed for most of the last decade. They were just left in unemployment. And what we're trying to do now, what the coalition government is trying to do, is get a route for people back into work. And that's why it's about making work pay. We even saw the Bank of England just this week saying that the benefits changes are helping do that. And it comes in two parts. It is about the biggest work programme, which is taking people, treating them as individuals, finding out what's stopping them getting into work. Is it retraining? Is it problems with literacy? Putting them on the skills that they need. But it's also about giving people the incentives too. That's about taking the lowest paid people out of tax altogether. That's so they've got more money in their pocket. That's about raising the minimum wage, which we've heard George Osborne is going to do, so that it always pays to be in work and not left for about a decade on benefits. And I take this gentleman's point here about putting money into the pockets of landlords. That's why capping of housing benefits, so it doesn't go beyond a certain amount, is to reduce the exorbitant rates that some private landlords are charging. So there's lots of work that's going on to try and reform benefits. Right across the country, and the idea is to get people into work, because that is the best route out of poverty in this country, is getting the country working again.
Okay, let's hear from one or two. Yeah, what's your view of this?
This is mainly for John, really, or everyone, suppose. Basically, you're on about putting people back into work, encouraging them to work, right? So why, when working people are currently struggling to pay childcare fees, in August will you give workless people free childcare? Where's the justice in that? Why are the working people not getting free benefits? Why are the jobless people getting them?
John Swinney, do you want to answer that?
Well, certainly for the cohort in August, there will be a proportion of unemployed parents who will get access to childcare to assist them to get back into employment and to support them back into employment. Now, what the and the childcare expansion is absolutely critical to enable people to get into the labour market, to support them on that journey out of unemployment and into working again, and to give the type of assistance which we all know is one of the principal barriers.
People? But they don't deserve nothing. What do I get for getting up and going to my work every single day? Nothing.
Let me come on to. Let me just address the point you're making there. I agree entirely with you. One of the big problems with the welfare reform programme of the UK government is it is an attack on the working poor. That is what it is. It is hitting the working poor.
Hold on, say it again.
It's a kick in the teeth to every working parent.
Are you a working parent?
No, my partner is.
The partner is.
I've got family, obviously, surrounding friends, family. But I witness it every day. It doesn't mean that it doesn't, you know, anger me slightly.
More than slightly. but your objection is that if you're working, you don't get the benefit. And then...
Basically, why are you giving people who aren't working, okay, for 2-year-old children, you're giving them childcare, 3 hours of childcare, when they're not working and got nothing. Well, they have got stuff to do. I don't mean to categorise like that, but you know, working people are out. They're putting back into the system. How are you encouraging people to get back into the system?
That's my point. The attack that's been made by the welfare reform programme is an attack on the working poor within this society, and it's a disgrace that that's the focus of the UK government's attack. The other folk who are getting attacked are some of the most vulnerable individuals in our society who are on the receiving end of the most disturbing and distressing news that they get as part of the whole welfare reform programme, which causes upset and distress and difficulty for some of the most vulnerable citizens in our society.
I'm not trying to deny I'm not saying that.
Well, the bedroom tax, for example, is... I had constituents in to see me on Friday who are on the receiving end of a visit from the state which says that their house is too big to accommodate a couple and a daughter who's got disabilities who requires an extra room to store the equipment to support her in dealing with her disability.
Are you against all the things that Ian Duncan is bringing in?
Well, I'm completely against the bedroom tax, and I think it's an iniquitous tax and an attack on some of the most vulnerable within our society today.
I'm actually appalled at how poor people are now being used as scapegoats in the political debate that's going on at the present time. A lot of folk in that Birmingham Street, and we had a programme here in Kilmarnock called The Scheme. They are, in a sense, the victims of the deindustrialisation that took place during the 1980s. They're not attractive people. We really wouldn't like them as next-door neighbours. But both the Labour Party and the Tory Party are using them as scapegoats. The shadow person in the front bench in the Labour Party this week says if you become unemployed, you go along to the job centre and you must sit a test to see whether you can read, whether you can count. Now, just think about it. Suppose you're a very highly skilled man, an engineer in the British aerospace down in Preston, and you're made redundant. And you go along and somebody behind a counter says to you, you're going to sit a test as to whether you can count. This man has been dealing with the highly complex machinery all his life. That's a humiliation. And I think that's appalling.
OK, let Ruth answer that. Ruth, you answer that point. Jim,
that's the Labour Party.
That's the Labour Party.
Yeah, that's
Rachel Reeves. What do you think of what Rachel Reeves is suggesting?
To be honest, I think Rachel Reeves' first foray, big foray into speaking about welfare showed a real lack of ideas or understanding from the Labour Party of what's going on in Britain. And I think if Jim wants to raise programmes like Benefit Street, I think we have to ask ourselves, why is Benefit Street one of these programmes that has shocked so many people? Because we know that so many people under the last Labour government were just left out of work for years. For years, Jim. For years.
Come on. All right. The woman there, and then I'll come to you, Kezia. Yes.
Leading on from the lady at the front, it's not just people on benefits that need help. I have friends who are working both full-time that are using food banks, they can't afford to get gas and electric for their children. It shouldn't be happening in today's society.
You say in the fourth row, yes. Yes, you.
Right, going by what Ruth said earlier on, I don't think the problem is to do with capping the benefit. I think the problem, or government should legislate against what the landlord takes. I think that should be more better off than capping the benefit. The
landlord should not be allowed to have a rent above a certain amount?
Yes. Exactly.
All right, let's go back to Rachel Reeves, Kezia. What do you make of the attack on her for being callous and ruthless?
So, you know, Ruth accuses the Labour Party of having a lack of understanding, and also in the same answer says that work should pay. Well, I believe work should pay, but it's her government that has built a recovery on temporary contracts and zero-hour contracts.
75% of the over 1 million jobs that have been created across the UK are full-time jobs. 75% of the over 1 million jobs that have been created in the UK since the coalition government came to power are full-time jobs. So don't just make assertions when you don't have the figures to back it up.
Well, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story, and it'll be a brief one, David, I promise you that. I do a lot of campaigning against debt in Scotland, and I spent a morning with a debt charity on the phones listening to people call in. And I heard a guy talk about how he'd been on benefits for ages, he'd got a job working for a big warehouse company, you can imagine which one it is, and he came off benefits onto a zero-hour contract. Because he was on the, underemployment at that point, he couldn't get benefits anymore. But he was living from one week to the next, trying to find out if he had any hours. And he was taking out payday loan debt to try and get from one week to the next, because there was just too much month at the end of his money. That's no existence. That's the type of recovery that George Osborne's been on the telly gloating about this week. For the vast majority of low-pay Britain just now, people are hurting. They're putting things back on the shelf. They can't pay the electricity bills.
You did to
we have
those
a cost
people?
of living crisis.
You doubled their taxes because they had a 10p tax rate. The Labour Party doubled the lowest paid tax rate because they were paying 10 pence and you doubled it to 20 pence. And all those people that were on 10p are paying nothing under the coalition government. We've taken millions of people out of taxation.
How much are they saving?
About £700 a year, which is a huge difference when you're living that close to on low pay. And also raising minimum wage up to beyond £7 is going to make a huge difference to people too. And it's all about making sure that work will always pay more than being on benefits, and that's what these changes are about.
You need jobs.
There's over 1 million jobs being created. Unemployment is down to 6.4% in Scotland.
I am utterly amazed when folks say, oh, it's down to 6%.
There's more to do. There's more to do.
Thousands and thousands of people unemployed. And they all talk about making work pay. How do you make work pay when there are no jobs available when you're at 6%?
Okay. I go from you, sir, yes. Man in spectacles there, and then I come to you. Yes.
The minimum wage would be increased, I think, very soon. Would that put a pressure on inflation? And minimum wage is already increasing, and they're saying that it's inflation adjusted. But what about the increase in house price? Because house price goes at a faster rate than CPI inflation.
We've got the minimum wage. We've got a question on the minimum wage. I'll take it now because that is the next step that the Chancellor of the Exchequer has said he's planning to introduce, or subject to agreement with the Commission that does it. Colin McNabb has got the question on the minimum wage. Let's have that, Colin, can we?
Can small and medium-sized private businesses afford a 10% rise in the minimum wage?
And is that a thing that worries you, that they may not be able to?
Well, you talk about childcare. Is that going to go up by 10% overnight? People in the global market, trying to work in the global market, is their wage rates going to go up by 10% overnight? The small shopkeeper struggling to make a living? Would we not be better going for the top 10%, working from the top down rather from the bottom up?
Okay. Ruth, can the country's economy afford this? The small businesses and medium-sized private businesses afford this?
Well, actually, one question kind of answers the other, in that the minimum wage had fallen slightly behind. I think it's right that it gets uprated now. I think it's right that, as the country comes out of, one of the worst recessions that we've ever had, and we're beginning to get on the right track. And, you know, I absolutely take on board that we have a long way to go. We had a lot of hard medicine to take, and we have a long way to go, but we are seeing signs this week of a recovery coming into gear.
But you're not answering this question, which was can small businesses afford it?
I'm guessing so,
Well,
David.
get to it, if you would.
But I think the people who...
I don't mean to be rude, but I mean, you know, we haven't got much time.
Well, I think the people that we have a duty to help first are the lowest paid, to make sure that, you know, that the recovery does benefit them first.
Yeah, but if you close small businesses as a result, is it going to be any benefit to anybody?
Well, we've helped a number of small businesses in terms of reducing national insurance contributions when you take on a new person, so they don't have to pay national insurance for the first time. That's a huge benefit to business. There's small business bonus schemes that are in operation, so there's work going on there too.
Is Labour
in terms of how much
increase?
money people have in their pockets, the lowest paid, we have a duty to make sure that they are one of the first people to feel the benefits from an upturn.
Is Labour in favour of this increase in the minimum wage? Do you want to go higher?
Ed Miliband's committed to increasing the national minimum wage by above inflation rates.
So what do you say to the questioner then about people who won't be able to afford it?
I've sympathy for the point of view, without a doubt. What a small business needs is stability and a fighting chance. But hang on a second, there's a socially just argument for a living wage and a higher national minimum wage. There's also an economic case for a higher national minimum wage, and that's better productivity of staff, happier staff, reduced sick leave, lower retention rates. And I think if politicians we make the economic case for why paying your staff more is a good thing, then I think there'll be less resistance to it. So it's about the arguments you make as well.
Why does it increase productivity to pay people more?
For a start, they don't have to have 3 jobs to make ends meet. That's one point. And people are just happier. The idea that you can go home after a hard working week, put food on your table and do things with your family, and that work pays in the way that Ruth clearly doesn't understand.
OK, I'll come to John. Man in the blue shirt there.
Not just reduce the base rate of tax instead of making small businesses pay to increase people's money for the cost of living.
OK. John Swinney.
I think the key thing is that there has to be a regular and clear increase in the minimum wage, and we've certainly committed ourselves on an ongoing basis to ensure that the minimum wage increases with inflation, because we've got wage rates in this country which cannot allow people to meet the challenges of living and supporting a family. Now, what government's got to do is to give practical and realistic support to small businesses to assist them in that bar, and that's why we have, for example, exempted or reduce the business rates of over 90,000 small businesses in this country. It's a bit rich for Kezia to say that she sympathises with the problem. Kezia wanted us to increase the business rates for companies within Scotland. Well, you opposed the financial decisions I took before Christmas.
John, I voted for your budget this week.
Which would have increased business rates.
I voted for your budget.
Well, it took a long time for you to get round to the sensible position of doing that.
But you're complaining about her and she voted for you.
What I'm complaining about is that she likes to have her cake and eat it at the same time. That's what I'm complaining about.
You said, do you think they're having their cake and eating it?
I based the question on a financial point and not a moral one. We should, as Scotland, be it Scotland or UK, we've really got to start manufacturing things and making things.
Yes, absolutely.
To create money.
That's right.
You can't bring the bottom up. You've got to try and close tax loopholes and get the top 5–10% to pay more. To create manufacturing jobs. Decent jobs.
And the steps that we're taking are to reduce the business costs of small companies, to make sure that small companies can make that contribution to the Scottish economy.
All right, the woman there with spectacles.
Can I just say I think it's really unfortunate that the gentleman there is talking about it being more about finances than about morals. I would suggest that it's extremely immoral to blame the poorest in society for manufactured austerity, when actually what we're looking at is the rich getting far, far richer, stockpiling money, and being given nothing but benefits. So rich people are paying far, far less tax, even than under Margaret Thatcher's time. Tax rates for the rich have gone down and down, whereas we've got poor people being blamed for needing an austere budget.
Yep. All right.
It's nonsense.
I agree completely with what the ladies just said, and back to what Jim said about the poor in this country being vilified. It's criminal what Ian Duncan Smith has done to this country. They're not going after. Can I just say, people talk about the benefits and how they're vilified. There's figures come out that the tax avoiders in this country cost this country 54 times what's paid in benefit. It's criminal what that party is getting away with, and it needs to stop.
Who says spectacles there?
I think that by not keeping the minimum wage up to a reasonable level has meant we've had to intervene and subsidise that, and that's been a huge mistake, and we're really in a mess now, and it's going to be very difficult to change it.
Okay, and you.
When we talk about the poor, I think we've got to be conscious. When a 3-year-old boy went missing in Edinburgh, it was the poor and the people on Benefit Street that were out in the cold looking for the kid. So we need to...
We've got a couple of minutes left. Blair Mackenzie, can we have your question?
What happens after Scotland votes no?
What happens after Scotland votes no? Clearly a supposition based on the figures at the moment, but let's just take it as a supposition. You have to be brief on this. Jim Sillars, what happens if Scotland votes no?
By 2016, those who voted no, if the nation votes no, will bitterly regret it.
Okay. Kezia, what happens?
I'm a positive person. I think good things will happen. I think we'll see more devolution. I think you've got 3 political parties in Scotland that are committed to more devolution. The Labour Party is going to put forward its plans for that in March.
How much more devolution do you want to see?
Well, we've got a devolution commission. I'm not on it. A lot of that work is still going on at the moment, but I think we will make sure that Scotland has the levers to make the type of change we want to see in this country.
But if you want more devolution, why not have independence and be done with it?
Because I believe, first and foremost, that we have the best of both worlds where we currently are. I want a strong Scottish Parliament and a strong United Kingdom, and I think we can have that.
OK. John Swinney, if it goes no, what happens?
Well, you'll understand, David, that I'm not going to
hypothetical question.
I never deal with hypothetical questions.
You must.
What I'm going to do,
Why not? Everybody deals with
I'm going to devote every single moment I can to ensure that Scotland is persuaded by the arguments for independence.
That's not an answer.
Because Jim Sillars is absolutely right. Scotland has everything to gain from independence, and we've got everything to gain from taking control of our own destiny and our own future, and we should go for it.
That's no answer. I thought you would describe black clouds lowering over Scotland, and if Scotland votes no, it'll be the end of the world. But not at all. You say, oh, we're going to win.
Well, we will win. All right, David, we will win.
Ruth, briefly, if you would. So we must come to
I hope that we then stop talking about the Constitution and start talking about the things that matter to people, because Scotland's been on pause. We don't want to talk about hospitals, schools, jobs, police, opportunities for our young people, because we've been talking too long about the constitutional make-up of Scotland and not enough about what we want for the people who are in Scotland.
OK, Blair Mackenzie. Blair Mackenzie, last word to you.
Well, the important question is, if we vote no, how long is this debate going away for? Because my fear is that it will keep cropping up. So can we have a guarantee that it will be put aside for 100 years? No. And then what's the process? What's the process that we move forward? Does England get a parliament like Scotland and Wales? How do we have the debate? What's the process, the mechanisms that we consider devolution or no devolution?
OK. Well, perish the thought we wouldn't have anything to talk about if we had been for 100 years. Thank you very much for the point. Our time's up now. We're going to be in Norwich next week. We have Ken Clark among our panellists there. And the week after that, we're going to be in Gillingham in Kent. If you'd like to come to either programme, you see what it's like to take part in Norwich or Gillingham, apply on our website. The address is there on the screen, or call 0330 123 9988. If you're listening on Radio 5 Live, as you know, this debate goes on Question Time, Extra Time, but it just leaves it to me to thank our panel and to all of you who came to the Caird Hall here in Dundee tonight for Question Time. Until next Thursday, from all of us here, good night.
Next tonight on BBC One Northern Ireland, we're sticking with political discussion as Andrew Neil's here for This Week.